The topic that I'm going to be doing is understanding the hindrance of black wealth, or that's AKA black wealth, because we're brown people. All right, but it's dealing with native-born Black Americans. That's what we're talking about. And the reason I have to say native-born Black Americans is because you're going to see somebody when we get in here who could be considered African American and doesn't look like many of us in here. All right, so if we go ahead and get into the next slide, because what we're going to dealing with is, again, is wealth. So we have to define wealth. All right, so many people, they talk about they want to be wealthy and things like that, or rich, but you have to distinguish the differences. So when you're looking at wealth, wealth measures the value of assets of worth owned by a person, um, community, company, or country. Wealth is determined by taking the total market value of all physical and tangible assets owned, then subtracting all debts. Essentially, wealth is the accumulation of scarce resources. Specific people, organizations, and nations are said to be wealthy when they are able to accumulate many valuable resources or goods. Wealth can be contrasted with income in that wealth is a stock and income is a flow, and it can be seen in either absolute or relative terms. All right, so if we look in scripture, a lot of times we consider Abraham wealthy. We could consider him wealthy because he possessed land. It talked about everything he possessed. It didn't always just refer to his money. So when we're looking at wealth, it is those tangible assets. What is it that can be passed down? What is it that you have that will not only flow through you, but flow through generations? That's something that the Father's actually, after that. That's what he's looking for in us, wealth. That's how we measure things, all right? And that's the way we should look to measure things. So when we're talking about wealth in America, what we're dealing with, like I talked about the brown, AKA Black Americans, where do we fall on this spectrum in America? All right. And that's what we have to be conscious of to see what has happened to the wealth from the brown, aka Black Americans, as they have come, as the generations has gone on, because, we've been in this country since some people say the 1600s, but really the 1500s. So if we've been here that long, what's that, over 500 years, 400 years? If we've been here that long, where do we stand on the spectrum? If we've been in the country that long, because we've been here just as long as European Americans. All right. So the thing about it is that if you look at America, you have to consider, many people want to say, it's the greatest country that, even in our Pledge of Allegiance, it says that, it's the country that is one nation under God. That's what it says. But the truth about America is that it's a Babylonian system. All right. And we get that from just defining, why was Babylon so wealthy? So, you have to go and study Babylon. All right. So let's go to the next one. Why was Babylon so wealthy? Babylon became the wealthiest city of the ancient world because its citizens were the richest people of their time. They appreciated the value of money. They practiced sound financial principles in acquiring money, keeping money, and making their money earn more money. Sound like compound interest to me. But the thing about it, these are all positive views that if you were talking to somebody that lived here in America, they talk about Babylon, you would think that this is a great concept, because what you're doing is it's a rich city. It's a city that's full of riches, and a lot of times when you think about, things like that, a lot of people try to point it in, what should I say, like a heaven, but it's really a false heaven, because, yes, heaven streets are paved of gold. But the thing is that the thing about heaven, or when we're talking about that country, that place, we're looking at that culture. The thing is, there isn't compromise. There isn't anything wicked. And that's the thing about Babylon. It was extremely wicked. All right. So the point I'm getting at is that Babylon was able to obtain its wealth by unrighteous acts or deeds or methods. All right. This had nothing to do with the kingdom. Okay. And when we're looking at America, if we compare the two, you'll see America did the same thing by exploiting those prisoners of war for financial gain. And a lot of people talk about capitalism and how great capitalism is. And the thing about capitalism is that, yes, it is used so that it's basically a free market. That's what it is. Anybody in America can get rich. And that's why you have a lot of foreigners come here and they're able to start businesses, and, they're able to get rich and do those things. Because, they say America is a land of opportunity. And the way that the government is set up, that those who actually are able to um, gain a lot of wealth, I'll say that, they're actually the ones who run the country. Okay, so that's what we have to consider, and we have to consider, is this the way of the kingdom? But looking at it from that perspective, what we want to consider is those who have gained all this money. What are they doing to the country? What laws are they pushing? What agenda are they pushing? What is it that they're doing? Is that of the Father? And if it's not, then the source. All right. And again, if they were exploiting those prisoners of war, those brown people, then, was that of the Father? And if what happened to brown people happened then, what was done to correct it? Because the thing about the Father is that he's all about freeing people. If you look at his people when they were in the land of Mitzrayim, called Egypt, he looked to deliver them. He gave them Moshiach, which was a type of Messiah. He gave his people a different culture at that time, which, you see all those laws. That was to, for them to be a prototype nation. All right. So if he did, if what happened to brown Americans was of the Father, then, what was there to, recompense what had happened? What did he give them? Did he lead them into a land? So that's what we look at. But the thing about the Babylonian system is we know that isn't true, because it's going to continue to exploit what has happened to those brown people. And it's once something is done, there has to be a way of correcting it. And if there isn't, then there's no wrong to their right. So the point I'm making is that when the enemy does something to people or to a group of people, there's a reason he's doing it. And if he continues to do it, then we see that the seeds of evil that are there, that they're going to continue to grow. All right. And so the way in order to counter evil is not with more evil, because a lot of times what people want to do when they hear about what has happened to these brown people is, they want to turn away from basically the Father. They want to turn away from what has happened, and they go on to other religions. All right. And a lot of those other religions, the Pan-Africanism and things like that, they really, the point I'm making, they turn away from Christianity. That's what I'm saying. Because they see that what it did to black people is that it put them in a mindset to be controlled. All right. Because as Elder Demetrius taught, you need religion to control a people. All right. So the point, I'm tying all of this up. The point that I'm getting to is that we're seeing, again, what has happened to these brown people. Where are we now? Where are we today? So if we look at the richest men in the world, and I have the list up there, you have Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bernard Arnault, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, Warren Buffett, Larry Ellison, Larry Page, Sergey Brin. All right. And the reason I made that statement because let me ask this question first. Where do 9 out of these 10 people reside today? In the United States. That's correct. The richest men in the world reside, 9 out of 10 of them reside in the United States. And if we look at Elon Musk, where's Elon Musk from? He's from Africa. So he is technically African American. And so that's why a lot of times you won't hear me use that term, because rights that are given to, when they put it in writing, African American, he could receive those same benefits. All right. So the thing is, it shows you that, and another thing about these richest men, how many of them are brown? None of them. None of them have ancestral heritage to those prisoners of war. All right. So we see here that even though we've been in this country just as long, we're still at the bottom of the totem pole, and you'll see it here on this next slide. And this is basically talking about white and Asian households have vastly more wealth than other households. And you'll see at the very bottom, the least percentage of change, you'll see it has black people here. So this was done, a lot of this was done on purpose. This was systemic. Go ahead and go to the next one. Because capitalism really is about get money any means necessary. That's what it really means. All right. And once and my pastor says this all the time, once you trace the dollar, you really see what the motive is behind it. All right. Because if you look at some of the things that were put in place in order to keep brown people in that poverty position, you'll see one is redlining. Redlining was a method that was used in order you had I'll say this, you had those brown Americans that were qualified for the loans but weren't able to get the loans because they didn't want them in certain neighborhoods. So a lot of these homes today that are appraised for $1 million that they bought back then for pennies, we don't have access to that wealth. All right. And this was done systemically. There's a movie called, I know, The Banker, where a guy was able to basically break through that by putting a white American as the face of his company. And then he was able to get approved for those loans. Where he messed up at was he tried to come down south and do it and got caught. The next one was integration. And a lot of people, they praise integration and different things like that, but it hurt black businesses because what happened was it took the money out of black communities. And we weren't able to support each other. The funding that a lot of what MLK did or what Malcolm X did was by black families. And when black families stopped putting their money towards the black businesses, I'll say black activism, then what happened was their money just separated and a lot of funding was lost. So, today what you have is a lot of black people depending on this government that put us in bondage in the first place. And another method is mass incarceration. And I'll skip down to poverty. 45.8% of young black children under the age of 6 live in poverty compared to 14.5% of white children. And this is really, it's really bad in Memphis. And I speak on Memphis because we're here. I didn't put it, when I talked about black business, I know that there are 60% of brown people that live in the city of Memphis. However, 90% of the businesses in Memphis are white owned. Only the rest of it is, owned by other races. But that shows you that in business, it's wealth, it's ownership. All right, so that's something that can be passed down. So that shows that a lot of the wealth just in Memphis alone is not given to the vast majority that live in the city itself. All right. So that shows where a lot of the spending is going. And I talked about the families in here. As of 2018, 65% of black children live in a single parent home. So what you see here is that, like I say, those funding for those black activism groups or black communities, a lot of it was lost because there was attack against the black family. An example of it is After Dark Dads or After Dark Fathers, where they couldn't receive assistance if a father was in the home. And another thing I have here is jealousy or covetousness, is because what you see is that when black people stopped supporting each other, what started happening was they started to work against each other. And that's what we have a lot today in our media and entertainment. It's all about, especially in the hip hop culture, it's all about having more money than the next person, being better than the next person. It's never about working together. That's not what we have today in a lot of that hip hop culture. It's working, basically, is being used for brown people to work against each other. All right. And that's what's being promoted the most, because it's I think rap is one of the top genres in the world. And a lot of those artists don't even receive that money. It goes to the record labels. And go to the last side, and I'll wrap it up here. This is not the kingdom way. So talking about all of this or dealing with this in basically a perspective of seeing how the wealth was not passed down to the brown people and how it was disproportionately distributed, what we'll see is that a lot of things were done this way, and we know it's the enemy. But that isn't, our only hope is this government, because once we're born again, we now have come to a different government. We're now kingdom citizens. So therefore, we can use the economic laws. And they're stated in Nehemiah 10:37, or those principles. I'm sorry. You have first fruit, you have offering, and you have tithes. And we use those as kingdom citizens for our benefits, all right? We're not here to be criminals. Criminals receive consequences of breaking the law. Citizens receive benefits of using the law. And, go to the last one, I'll end it. But kingdom inheritance, we'll all have been inherited after we have been redeemed. We're now born again. All right. Now we're the seed of Abraham. And as I said before, through Yeshua. All right. As I said before, we now have rights, benefits, privileges. And one of those is wealth, because we know that Abraham was very wealthy, and our wealth, it first starts in our thinking. So we have to think ourselves wealthy first.